Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Diarmaid Walshe. I'm the CEO of Soldier On, and I'm a Kerry man. What I'm going to look at today is I want to look at how we look at inclusion and cohesion using archaeology. Look at the barriers to involving local communities in their heritage. What are the benefits? Examples that we have used in our projects. And most importantly, what have we found that has worked in trying to get communities actively involved in their heritage? Now, first of all, Soldier On, we're in operation for 10 years. We were originally set up as a military charity. However, we have now changed and we've adapted, and we now use archaeology and heritage to create social benefit, help with employment and training. And what we're trying to do is to get communities, people within communities who traditionally don't engage with their heritage, to take part and to become involved in creating projects. Two pictures there. Present is His Royal Highness Lord Freddie Windsor, and for the women here, does anybody know who the bottom person is? It is Lawrence Fox. He is also a member of our trustees, a very active member of Soldier On. When we looked at inclusion and cohesion, we asked ourselves some questions, and these are questions that we should be asking ourselves. What do we actually want when we engage with communities? One thing that I find when I go along to a lot of conferences, when I look in the audience, and I mean this is no disrespect, but the audience is very mature. It's, I remember going to one conference, and I worked as a medical officer, and looking around the audience, I was afraid that I might have to use my medical expertise of some of the participants because it looked like the Walking Dead. And that's something that I see time and time again. It seems to be white, middle class, and more mature audience. And we have to ask ourselves, do we want the same old faces taking part in all the projects, or do we want it to be a reflection of society as a whole? And the other thing we have to understand that society has now become a lot more complex. They've become a lot more multicultural. People have different views on what heritage and archaeology is. And a good example of this was last year we brought a number of Syrian refugees down in Kent who were living in Dover. And we thought it would be a good idea to introduce them to the culture of Great Britain by bringing them around some of the key heritage sites in Kent. So we brought them to Dover Castle, we brought them to Richmond Roman Fort, we brought them to the early Christian Church of Culver, and then we arranged a private trip around Canterbury Cathedral with the Archbishop of Canterbury. We thought this would be absolutely fantastic. Fantastic introduction to the archaeology of Britain and Kent. No. One of the individuals who was with me is a soldier who worked with me, and he was a Muslim. And he came to me after about halfway through the trip, when we just got to the cathedral, and he said, "We've got a problem." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "They don't want to go in." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "They're convinced they're going to be forcibly baptised." They were convinced that this was a ploy to convert them from being Muslims to being Christians. Because their experience of working with people that were looked upon as the establishment was one of fear. And we had made a very simple mistake. We assumed that something that we would enjoy, that we would engage in, that they would engage with as well. And we had to sit down for an hour and explain to them what we're trying to achieve. And what we're trying to get across to them is that Britain is a multicultural society. It is made up of different cultures that come in over thousands of years. The Romans, the Saxons, the Vikings, the Irish, and they're just new arrivals. And once we've done that, we had that communication with them, they understood what we were trying to achieve, and it smoothed over the issue. And that's what I mean by we have different views of heritage. It can be a positive view, it can be a negative view. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is to create a unifying force for inclusion and social bonding within our society. It's to draw people together, to overcome differences that may exist within society, of which there is many. And when we look at that, we have to look at what barriers are being put in place, some of which we can control, some of which we can't. We have different social groups. We have people who are disabled. They feel that they may not be useful on site. I've had people come to me and say, "I'd love to take part, but I don't think I'll be any use. I have this disability. And I said, it doesn't matter. No matter what your disability is, we will find something useful for you to do, something where you can be of value to the project. We've done a lot of work with yachts, which are basically young people who are not in training, not in employment, not in education. And my original background was I taught 12 years teaching special needs kids, EBD kids, in Bromley in London. Long very involved in gangs. And the thing that I found, I took them out and we did archaeology. And they loved it. Because for the first time in their life, they were doing something they could actually access. They didn't feel a failure. They were doing something that other people were interested in. Also, people with mental health or people who feel excluded from society. For a lot of them, it's a way of coming in a non-threatening environment to take part in an activity that they find interesting. Because people, whether we like it or not, do find archaeology interesting. It does engage something special within the psyche. We want to know who we are and where we came from. But we also have to consider that there is people who feel that they're not good enough because of their educational standard. They may have literacy or numeracy difficulties. I'm dyslexic. Sometimes you put paperwork in front of me, it does frighten me, I'll be honest with you. So if you have people coming on site or you get them involved and you suddenly produce reams and reams of paperwork, risk assessments, contact sheets, recording sheets, etc., unconsciously you could be frightening them off because they may not want to disclose that they may have difficulties reading and writing. They may have difficulty doing basic numeracy. And we also use big words, jargon, to kind of put ourselves above everybody else, which then puts in, again, this division between us and them. And the other thing I've noticed that when we advertise projects, when we go out and we try to get the community involved, are we actually going to the place where the community actually are? I was the person who developed Up Nightingale. It was my idea. And one of the big issues I had was trying to get soldiers involved. Now, if you go to a soldier and say, I tell you what, I know what's going to help you, is you're going to dig a hole. Now, saying that to especially an infantry soldier will not go down well. And for a lot of them, they had become so socially isolated, they hadn't been involved, they did not want to engage. So what I did was I went to their wives. And I basically convinced the wives it would be a good idea to get their husbands out of the house. So when the wife tells one of the soldiers that they will take part, they normally take part. But it's going and finding who the influence leaders within the community, social media, going to places where the community you want to target actually works and gathers. And the other thing is to enable people that when they have or take part in these projects, they feel ownership. As Faye said earlier, I think it's a really important word, that they feel there's control. And we found exactly the same thing. The one activity that we did that people loved was test pitting, because they owned that test pit. And God help anybody, including myself, who came across and tried to give them a hand. It was like if you put your hand into the test pit, it would be cut off with a trowel. And the other thing we found was sometimes just providing food. One of the things that we do in all our projects, we've got a relationship with Tesco's, they give us food that's gone out of date. We will actually provide food on site for everybody, regardless of who they are. And we find that a lot of people come along, maybe not because they're interested in archaeology, especially the younger people, because they are going to get a proper meal. And that I think is quite sad. And it's something as people maybe from a middle class background, upper middle class don't understand. Some people are struggling. And providing food not only gives them some sustenance, but also they cannot take part in the project if they're hungry. And I noticed at the very start you'd have two groups. You'd have people who would go off, they'd go to the pub, they'd bring their sandwiches, and then you have people in the corner just eating a packet of crisps. And the final thing we have to consider, and it's something I care passionately about, if we are working with the community as a whole, we're going to be working with vulnerable individuals. And we have a duty of care towards them. And we need to make sure that they are kept safe. We need to make sure that we do no harm, and we should put in practice and in place safeguarding policies, and I just don't mean child protection, but ensuring that we do not go beyond our remit. I am trained on mental health, and I have witnessed people on excavations engaging in what I would term medical intervention, and that's extremely dangerous and can have very tragic consequences. So what are the benefits? We've all these barriers. What do we get out of it? What does the community get out of it? First of all, one of the biggest issues I believe facing modern society is social isolation. People are lonely. And I used to do recruiting for the army, and I used to ask people afterwards, why did they join the army? And believe it or not, a lot of people said to me, to make friends. I think with the growth of social media, I watched my daughter with her friend and they text each other. They don't actually communicate. I think a lot of people today, both the young and the old, are finding it more difficult to make that human contact. And the great benefit for archaeology, for me, is that it allows you to mix together with people of different abilities, different ages, different backgrounds. And for me, personally, it has created a big plus in my life. I was blown up in Iraq in 2004. I was seriously injured. I had serious facial injuries. I had memory loss. And for me, I got into archaeology for a second time because it allowed me to try to normalise my life. And it also rebuilds self-esteem. For a lot of people that I work with, their self-esteem is rock bottom. They don't have self-esteem. And that, of course, then leads to other issues like mental health. But when they go on site and they make friends and they find something that is exciting and they're sending pictures to their family saying, look what I found, as you were talking earlier about the musket balls, something very small, something that we would term insignificant, can mean a great deal to somebody. For some of these people, for the first time in their life, for a long time, they have done something that they are proud of. And more importantly, their family is proud of. So what groups should we consider? What groups do we work with? We work with universities. We have a lot of university students on our excavations and our projects. And the one thing you find is you think university students, well-adjusted, intelligent, young, fit. What I found is that 30 to 40% of the students who arrive suddenly start to display symptoms that I would classify as a mental health issue. They are representative of society. And there's a gentleman there in the picture. He's an older gentleman bending down to shovel. Now, everybody, any pictures I've shown here, any stories I tell, I have been given consent to actually tell their story. That is a man called Gary. Gary was an infantry soldier. He went to Northern Ireland at 18 years of age, and his best friend was killed in front of him in Derry. He suffers from PTSD, he suffers from social anxiety, he cannot be around other people, he can't be around large crowds. When he first came to us, basically he told me, he said, I only came because my wife made me come and I was going to engineer a situation so I could go home as quickly as possible. 4 years later, he's still with us. He has found that it allows him control of his life, it allows him to interact with other people, it allows him to feel human again. It's not about curing them. Nothing we do is about rehabilitation and therapy. We're not trying to cure people. All we're trying to do is give people a chance in their life to be happy, even just for a small period of time, to be able to move forward and do something that they are proud of and their family is proud of. We also try to create normalisation, is to get local groups to come in and give a hand, people like refugees, offenders, groups that traditionally don't engage in heritage. And what we find is, if you do it properly, if you put in a proper structure, you can make it attractive to them. And the other thing we found, and this is research that we did with Up Nightingale, was fitness. When you take people over 2 or 3 weeks and they have a very structured program, they get up in the morning at the same time, they have a decent food, decent breakfast, they're working hard. One guy rang me and he said, thank you. He said, I came home, the first thing my wife said to me, you've lost weight, you look much better. And he said, I had a very good weekend. And that's all I would say on that. And I think a lot of people have problems with their appearance, they have problems with their physical fitness, and suddenly they come back and they feel better, they feel fitter, so consequently they feel better about themselves. But most important of all, people have fun. For some people, it's the first time in a long time that they've actually had a laugh. They've had some crack. They've actually been able to engage with people normally in a positive relationship. Now, one of the things that we looked at was, well, how do you get these groups involved, groups that normally don't engage with heritage? And I call it guerrilla interaction. That does not mean I bring a gorilla along just to draw people in. we try to do things differently. So the first thing we do is, a lot of people kind of go to museums to announce a project or to show what they've done. We find that, especially in communities we work with, they don't go there. So we go to places like Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda. We will set up a small little stand for maybe 3 or 4 hours and give people a chance to see what we do, sign up for further information. A big open day we did at Carwent, we aimed it very much at families. So they had a chance to make some pottery, we fired some tiles for them, we got people hands-on. We had people dressing up in Roman costumes, and people love dressing up. And another example of a project was in Folkestone, very deprived area, and this is St Ainsworth Church in the centre of Folkestone. And what we wanted to look at was a graveyard survey, but also to look at how people reacted or interacted with their heritage, and how they saw it. And the church was right at the centre of town, and we've got a group there, a group of dog walkers who used the church, this 18th century graveyard, as a place to walk their dogs and meet and have a chat about football and put the world to right. It's also a place where all the shoplifters and drug dealers come to do their trade. And where you see the 2 police officers, the tabletop to him at the back is where the local drug dealer, and we met him, and he's a very nice guy, and talking about how he did his trade and how long he's been there, will come and actually ensure that his customers are properly served. And also it's where the shoplifters come to hide behind the 2 to take the shopping tags off their stolen, ill-gotten gains. And it's also a place where the local kids come from school, especially at lunchtime, to sit and talk and to look at their phones. So we need again to see that people have a different appreciation of a heritage asset. It's not just about, this is very valuable and tells us about our past, but it's also a living space where people go and interact with, both for good and for bad. And interesting, at the end of the 2-week project, the police told me that the issues of antisocial behaviour declined dramatically in the graveyard because people were more aware of the importance of that particular asset amongst their community. The funniest thing we saw was a guy who had 2 tortoises, and he used to bring them to the graveyard every day to let him out while he read his book. And I said, why the graveyard? And he said, well, the grass is organic. As I said, we try to engage everybody. We have people from 5 years of age right up to 75. We have people who've been homeless, we have people with substance abuse, we've got people with mental health issues, people who have nothing at all wrong with them. But the one thing that I don't do is I never ask them what's wrong with them. I don't care. They're here as a human being to take part in the project that hopefully they'll find interesting and fun. We're not trying to create archaeologists. We're not trying to create people who will suddenly become converts to heritage. We're just trying to use the heritage asset for research, but also to give people a decent time, and hopefully when they will leave with very good and fond memories, and most importantly, leave with friendships. So in terms of what have we discovered from our projects, if we're serious about community archaeology, we're serious about community engagement, we have to target all elements of the community. It's very easy to take the people who are interested, the people who are not going to be a problem. That to me is wrong, it's unethical. We need to allow everybody, regardless of who they are, what their problems are, to engage in the projects that we run. We have to make it exciting. We have to make sure that whatever we do, when people go there, we've given the same enthusiasm that we have for heritage. And we do that by making it fun. We need to give people ownership. It shouldn't be top down, telling local communities, right, this is what you want to do, this is what we're going to find out, and this is how we're going to do it. We need to give them the opportunity to set the agenda. This is a place that we're interested in. This is something that we would like to find out. And then allow them to develop that plan in conjunction with yourself. Guerrilla Interaction, go out into the community. Go to the places that the community live and work. Find who the influence leaders are. Get them on board. Make them as enthusiastic as you are. We need to make sure that we have proper safeguarding. We have proper policies in place to make sure that if somebody is vulnerable, that they will have the same positive experience as everybody else. And also protect ourselves. You may find that suddenly when people are around people for the first time and they're having positive interaction, that can drag up memories, it can drag up instances which could come back and actually cause problems. And I know from speaking to colleagues, they've had issues where people have kind of lost it on site. What do you do? So maybe putting training for your volunteers to deal with issues like that. And then the final thing, and to me the big thing, something that we are very poor at, is we need to have research. If we are making claims that this is money well spent, that this is engagement with the community, it's having a positive effect on well-being, community cohesion, inclusion, etc., we need to have the evidence to show without any doubt that what we're doing is the correct way to do things. If we are serious about getting money and increasing the amount of money put into research, into heritage by government and county organisations, we have to show them that what we do has value. Not just making wild claims which undermines our argument. So, has anybody got any questions?